Let's take a second to talk about the Arf Arf boys. Man, I swear that it seems like every time you think that Knocked Loose has hit some sort of plateau and there's no way they can get larger, they somehow do something even crazier than before. I enjoy a lot of metalcore music, so I'm always kind of in tune with the bands that are blowing up or getting some acclaim in the underground, bands that would later go on to do great things, and that's exactly how I felt about Knocked Loose back in the laugh track days. This weird hybrid crossover of beat-down hardcore music and just general hardcore punk music mixed with absurdity converge-like metalcore music that was insanely distorted and heavy and all-encompassing and compressed to smithereens, all with Brian Garris's Mickey Mouse-esque vocals. It was unique. You could very clearly tell that in the vast array of metalcore bands that were becoming very homogenous and not really going outside of any comfort zone, that they were obviously going to stand out of the crowd. But the reason that I think Knocked Loose is so important is because I feel like there are very few other bands that have been able to do what they do for extreme music. This video was inspired by them recently going on fucking Jimmy Kimmel and performing Suffocate with Poppy, and if you're familiar with Suffocate, very heavy song. Not to mention years back, I forget what year exactly it was, but Knocked Loose played at Coachella, and if you're unfamiliar with Coachella, it's pretty much a large-scale music festival. If I remember right, I think it's the biggest every year in the United States, and they play to tens of thousands of people, hundreds upon thousands of which were moshing and getting into it. These are pop listeners. These are people that listen to fucking Ice Spice and Doja Cat. So not only were they getting an entire crowd hyped of a bunch of EDM and hip-hop and pop listeners and mainstream listeners, they also went on Jimmy Kimmel, and you've probably seen him on YouTube, but if you're from another part of the world, you may not know, he is one of the biggest late-night talk show hosts in the entirety of United States talk shows. It would be like saying Jimmy Fallon or Conan O'Brien or back in the day David Letterman or Jay Leno. Like, he is one of the biggest talk show hosts, and oftentimes, I believe every single show or every other show, I don't really watch it that much, there is a musical artist, and most of the time you can kind of understand where they're coming from. It's like K-pop bands and pop singers and hip-hop artists. You don't usually see something like Knocked Loose with breakdowns that are the size of skyscrapers. And the weird thing about Knocked Loose that I've always been impressed by is that they did not sacrifice any of their heaviness on their come-up, and in fact doubled down on it. And this is such a rare occurrence when it comes to metal piercing into the mainstream. I've talked at length many times before that metal always sort of has this doorway into the mainstream where there will be bands that sort of garner a lot of acclaim either because people like looking at it like a circus freak show, or it genuinely has a reason for being as big as they end up being. You saw it with bands like Pantera and Metallica. Even though it's like not metal adjacent, a lot of the grunge bands like Nirvana and Alice in Chains. And in recent memory, you're seeing bands like Sleep Token and Spirit Box and Lorna Shore garner the same amount of mainstream publicity. Now obviously mainstream in the metal sense isn't obviously going to be the same as a new Doja Cat or Tyler the Creator or Justin Bieber record, but in comparison to how metal albums usually do numbers, you can oftentimes see some of these bands get millions upon tens of millions of plays and listens across all platforms, which is practically unheard of for the vast majority of metal artists. And so when a band starts to sort of get popular, it's usually because they're either doing something to cross over into the mainstream, unintentionally or intentionally, or their sound is digestible enough to a mainstream audience that people are interested in it. Another way you could also look at it is if something is brand spanking new and people are always on the search for something unique and interesting. That's why nu metal blew up. Bands like Linkin Park and Slipknot, Korn, Disturbed, System of a Down. It was because up until that point, the Limp Bizkity rap rock metal sort of stuff didn't really come from anyone except for maybe the Beastie Boys sometimes. So it was really fresh and exciting and exhilarating, and people that weren't really interested in it usually could find some sort of appreciation in a new artistic media for metal and just music as a whole to sort of jump on the bandwagon, because people love to hate on things that are popular, but people also like to know why something's popular to begin with. And in general, metalcore is no stranger to the mainstream at face value. There have been plenty of metalcore bands that have pierced into the mainstream, even back in the days of As I Lay Dying and Killswitch Engage and Bullet for My Valentine, and of course, the scene metalcore days of Bring Me the Horizon and Asking Alexandria, Icy Stars, Inner Shikari, Sorry, so on and so forth. So when it comes to the octane core type of metalcore of today combined with the metalcore I just mentioned, metalcore isn't so far removed that it's like a fucking grindcore project. But the interesting thing about Knocked Loose is they are pretty unique for metalcore in terms of what most people know as metalcore. When people think of metalcore, if they don't know that much about it, they're thinking soaring choruses and melodic riffs and sometimes a little bit of a screamy scream. But generally speaking, I don't think anyone can sit in front of me and say that Kill Switch Engage or As I Lay Dying are nearly as intense and extreme as Knocked Loose, and that's coming from their hardcore influence, their beatdown influence, which is something that mainstream audiences outside of some of Converge's work have not really been exposed to on a large scale level. So this is their introduction to that, and so even if they didn't like metalcore to begin with, they may like this type of metalcore because it is very different than what you are getting. They're very popular, they have not sacrificed their style, and if anything, they have gotten more and more heavy, so they're not selling out, and I don't think anyone can look at Knocked Loose and say that they are forgetting their roots or that they are selling out, because with each release, they're becoming more heavy, more intense, more extreme, and more people in the process are getting into them, and they're still being able to play live shows that barely any metal bands nowadays are able to play unless you're a well-established band, and even bands like, you know, the Spirit Boxes of the world and Sleep Tokens of the world aren't able to do what Knocked Loose are doing, and they are far more digestible to a mainstream audience. Most of Knocked Loose, they don't have clean singing, they don't have clean vocals, they don't have very clean riffs, they have gnarly, fucked up riffs with high-pitched Mickey Mouse screaming, louder than life breakdowns, multi-vocalists, tons of distortion, and they just sound amazing while doing it. And I think that that gateway into heavy music is such a rare anomaly, and that's why I made the video once about how there would never be another Knocked Loose, is because I don't really think there is going to be. I think that they have set the tone for metalcore, beatdown music, and mainstream metal, and showing that you don't have to sell out your style, because I think when the passion is there, it bleeds through, and you're going to get so many people into your type of music that never would have heard about it otherwise. And that's why there's so many comments under the live performances that are like, some 13-year-old's world is about to be changed forever. And I really think that's the case, because the gateway bands of the past, they weren't heavy. I don't think we really had that many gateway bands throughout the decades that were this edgy and this heavy. Most of the time there was some sort of mainstream accessibility, but when you listen to Knocked Loose, it's really hard to find any sort of mainstream accessibility. They hit you like a ton of bricks and they don't apologize for it. But I want to know your guys' opinions of this. Do you think Knocked Loose being big is important or good or bad? You can let me know down in the comment section below your opinions of this whole topic and Knocked Loose as a band as a whole. Agree or disagree, there is no wrong answer, but be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is, my name is Jay Morris, and I'm signing off saying farewell.